There is a profound, almost imperceptible weight that settles upon a soul when the noise of the world becomes too loud to bear. You walk through the crowded streets, you navigate the endless demands of a modern existence, and to anyone looking from the outside, you are moving forward. You are doing what is expected. You are surviving. But beneath the surface, in the quietest, most hidden chambers of your heart, an invisible void has begun to open. It is not a sudden emptiness, but a slow, creeping shadow, a subtle drifting that happens so quietly you barely even notice it taking place. You find yourself sitting in a room full of people, surrounded by laughter and conversation, yet you feel entirely detached, as if you are watching a movie of a life that no longer belongs to you. You begin to question your own worth, wondering if the checkboxes you are ticking each day have any real meaning, or if you are simply running on a treadmill of expectations that has no destination. The world tells you to keep going, to achieve more, to perform better, to mask the exhaustion with a smile. But the fatigue you feel is not one that sleep can fix. It is a weariness of the spirit, a deep-seated ache that comes from carrying a burden you were never designed to bear alone. You have allowed the external chaos to dictate your internal state, and in doing so, your path has begun to drift, moving further and further away from the quiet sanctuary of peace that was prepared for you from the very beginning. It is precisely in these moments, when you feel slightly undone, when an incomplete emotion or a passing thought of despair attempts to take root, that the darkness tries to find its entry point. It does not always come with a violent storm or a dramatic crash. More often than not, it is a tiny, microscopic crack within the heart, a silent vulnerability that allows the cold waters of doubt to seep in. It whispers that you are isolated, that nobody truly sees the depth of your exhaustion, and that you must rely solely on your own fading strength to keep from sinking. But I tell you this, beloved child, I am no longer remaining silent in your life. I am not speaking to frighten you, or to bring condemnation upon your weary shoulders, but to gently shake you awake, to pull your gaze away from the suffocating darkness and redirect it toward the light where you truly, eternally belong. You must remember that you are not a wandering soul cast adrift in a vast, indifferent universe, left to fight battles beyond your capacity. Long before the foundations of the world were laid, long before you ever drew your very first breath into this physical realm, I knew you completely. I knew the intricate design of your spirit, the cadence of your thoughts, and the exact capacity of your heart. Every single heartbeat that echoes in your chest carries my personal imprint, a divine rhythm that cannot be erased by the temporary trials of this life. You are not an accident of nature, nor are you a byproduct of circumstance, floating aimlessly through time. You are a deliberate, beautifully crafted intention, a living plan written in the permanent ink of grace. And because your identity is rooted in my sovereign design, no darkness that attempts to enter your life, no matter how heavy or persistent it may seem, has the ultimate authority to define who you are. The heavy silence of the night can be a terrifying place when your mind begins to wander, when you lie awake staring at the ceiling, unable to pinpoint the exact source of the heaviness pressing down on your chest. You look back at your day, at your week, at your years, and you feel a strange, unexplainable grief rising within you. You stand before the breathtaking beauty of a sunset or the quiet magnificence of creation, and instead of joy, tears spontaneously rise to your eyes without any logical explanation. You look at everything you have built, everything you possess, and yet a profound sense of emptiness remains, a hollow space that nothing in this material world seems capable of filling. You might dismiss these experiences as mere emotional volatility, as chemical imbalances, or the simple consequence of a stressful life, but I want you to listen closely to the truth. These are the sacred moments when I am drawing nearest to you in your ultimate weakness. When the world recedes, when your distractions fail you, and when your self-generated strength finally crumbles, that is when the space is cleared for my presence to be felt. I do not withdraw from you when you are broken, nor do I turn my back when your faith feels fragile and small. I come closer still, stepping into the void you cannot fill, understanding the unspoken groans of your soul more deeply than you could ever comprehend yourself. The world demands perfection. It rewards the strong, and it discards the broken, but my kingdom operates on an entirely different truth. I am always intimately close to the brokenhearted, wrapping them in a fierce, protective love that they are not yet fully capable of recognizing. The voices that have been echoing in your mind lately, the persistent whispers that tire your thoughts and drain your energy, they are not my voice. The whispers that tell you that you are fundamentally not enough, that you have made too many mistakes, that you have wandered too far down the wrong path to ever find your way back home. Those are the voices of distortion. I do not communicate through the heavy, crushing weight of condemnation, nor do I use shame to drive you into submission. My voice does not push you away when you stumble. It stretches out a hand to catch you, to pull you closer to my side. If what you are hearing in the quiet hours of your mind leads you toward utter despair, toward hopelessness, or toward the belief that you are beyond redemption, you can be certain that it is not me speaking. My voice is a gentle, persistent calling that cuts through the noise, a soft frequency that speaks of home, of safety, and of an unconditional belonging that requires no performance. Think of the prophet Elijah when he fled into the barren wilderness, completely spent, emotionally bankrupt, and ready to surrender his very life to the darkness. He sat under that solitary broom tree, believing he was entirely alone, expecting me to answer him in the roaring wind, in the terrifying earthquake, or in the consuming fire. But I was not in the loud, overwhelming displays of power. I came to him in a gentle, low whisper, a sound of sheer silence that met him exactly where his strength had ended. I do not always come to you in the grand, spectacular events of life, but in the deep, undisturbed stillness of your darkest hours. But if your heart remains crowded with the competing voices of fear, of regret, and of worldly anxieties, you will lose the ability to recognize my frequency. That is why I am calling you back into the quiet right now, not to isolate you, but to clear away the static so you can hear my truth clearly once again. The structural breakdown of a life does not usually happen in a single, devastating moment of cataclysmic ruin. It is far more perilous than that. It is a slow, quiet, almost invisible unraveling, a microscopic tearing of the fabric of your expectations that occurs over months and years of silent endurance. You began this journey with so much certainty, armed with plans, driven by ambition, and fueled by the belief that if you simply worked harder, gave more of yourself, and stood stronger, you could conquer any wave that rose against you. You built towers of ideals in your mind, convincing yourself that your value was directly tied to the weight you could carry, to the storms you could weather without flinching, and to the endless list of achievements you could display before the world. But there is a mathematical limit to human endurance, an invisible threshold where the human spirit, operating purely on its own limited resources, begins to fracture under the continuous, unforgiving pressure of existence. You started to notice the change in the small, seemingly insignificant details of your daily routine. The tasks that once brought you a sense of purpose began to feel like leaden weights, exhausting your mental capacity before your feet even touched the floor in the morning. You found yourself looking at your reflection in the mirror, searching for the spark of enthusiasm that used to define you, only to find a hollow gaze staring back, a stranger whose eyes were clouded by an unspoken, accumulated fatigue. You tried to push through it, applying the old formulas of self-discipline, forcing your body to move, commanding your mind to focus, and layering your face with a carefully constructed mask of competence so that no one would suspect the fragile state of the architecture within. You told yourself that this was just a passing phase, a brief season of burnout that would dissolve if you only caught your breath over the weekend or found a new strategy to manage the overwhelming chaos. But weekends came and went, strategies were implemented and abandoned, and the heaviness did not lift. Instead, it grew denser, settling into your bones, anchoring itself within your thoughts until every movement felt like wading through deep, dark waters. The collapse is painful because it forces you to witness the systematic failure of your own strength, the slow-motion demolition of everything you thought you had under perfect control. You watch your emotional resilience wither away until a single critical word from a stranger or a minor complication in your schedule has the power to shatter your composure entirely, leaving you trembling in the quiet corners of your room. You begin to withdraw from the people who love you most, not because you no longer care for them, but because the mere act of engaging in conversation, of maintaining the illusion that you are okay, requires an energy you simply do not possess. You isolate yourself in the darkness, pulling the curtains closed against the vibrant light of the world, because the happiness of others has become a painful reminder of the joy you have somehow lost along the way. You find yourself trapped in an endless loop of overthinking, your mind racing through a maze of regrets, analyzing every choice you ever made, tracing the exact moments where the trajectory of your life began to deviate from the perfect path you had imagined. The expectations you placed upon yourself, combined with the heavy, unyielding demands of a society that measures human worth by production and perfection, have become a prison of your own making. You feel the terrifying sensation of falling apart entirely, an internal shattering where your beliefs, your identity, and your security are being stripped away piece by piece, leaving you exposed, vulnerable, and completely exhausted at the edge of an abyss. You cry out into the silence of your room, asking how you arrived at this place of total bankruptcy, wondering why the universe has allowed your foundations to crumble so completely when you tried so hard to do everything right. You look at the pieces of your broken life scattered around you, your shattered dreams, your fractured relationships, your depleted health, and your fainting faith, and you conclude that this is the final chapter, that you have failed so profoundly that restoration is an impossibility. But I want you to pause in the midst of this terrifying descent and listen to the truth that your pain is currently blinding you from seeing. This collapse, as agonizing and terrifying as it feels to your human senses, is not an act of divine abandonment or a sign of your ultimate destruction. It is a sacred, necessary unraveling, a divine intervention designed to rescue you from the dangerous illusion of self-sufficiency. You have spent your entire life building an identity on the shifting sands of human effort, trying to prove your worth through your own power, and in doing so, you have built a life that had no room for my sovereign grace. I have allowed your self-generated strength to fail. I have permitted your towers of expectation to fall, not to punish you, but to deliver you from the exhausting labor of carrying a world you were never meant to hold. When you are strong in your own eyes, you are closed to the infinite dimensions of my power. But when you are broken, when you finally reach the absolute end of your own resources and admit that you can no longer fix yourself, that is when the true supernatural architecture of your life can begin. The falling apart is actually a falling into my hands, a transition from the fragile security of your own control into the unshakable, eternal fortress of my love. Do not fear the ruin that surrounds you right now, and do not despair over the strength that has vanished from your spirit. The old structure of your life had to crumble because it was too small to contain the vast, magnificent destiny I have prepared for your soul. I am not a God who merely patches over the cracks of an old, decayed foundation. I am the master builder who dismantles the brokenness so that I can construct something infinitely more beautiful, resilient, and eternal upon the rock of my presence. Every tear that falls from your eyes as you watch your expectations die is being caught and preserved in my heavenly bottles. Not a single ounce of your sorrow is being wasted or ignored. The exhaustion you feel is an invitation to finally stop running, to lay down your heavy armor, and to surrender the impossible warfare you have been waging against your own limitations. You do not have to perform for me. You do not have to present a repaired, perfect version of yourself to gain my favor, and you do not have to hide the bleeding wounds of your heart from my sight. I love you precisely in your undone state, in the very hour of your collapse, when you have nothing left to offer but your breath and your brokenness. Let the world go. Let the demands fade into the background, and allow yourself to simply fall into the deep cushion of my mercy. The darkness that seems to be closing in on you is not the darkness of a tomb. It is the protective shadow of my wings, a hidden sanctuary where I am keeping you safe while the old, false versions of your life are systematically dissolved. You are entering a holy space where your human ego must die so that your true, divine identity can be born. Trust the process of this undoing, even when it causes your heart to ache with an unexplainable grief, for I am intimately present in the ruins, watching over you with a love that will never let you go, preparing you for a resurrection that will far exceed anything you could ever ask or imagine. The descent into the darkest valley of the human spirit is a journey marked by an absolute, terrifying stillness. When the initial shock of the collapse has finally subsided, and the chaotic noise of the crumbling structures grows quiet, you are left standing alone in the deep, unyielding winter of your soul. This is the place of deep suffering, a profound wilderness where the illusions of comfort are entirely stripped away, leaving you face to face with the raw, unvarnished reality of your internal wounds. It is an experience that transcends mere sadness or passing grief. It is a heavy, ambient sorrow that seems to alter the very chemistry of the air you breathe, making every inhale a conscious effort and every exhale a silent plea for release. In this subterranean chamber of existence, time ceases to move in its usual linear fashion. Minutes stretch into agonizing eternities, and the nights become vast, uncharted oceans of isolation where you feel completely cast away from the shores of the living. You look into the mirror of your history and you see not just the recent failures, but the long, accumulated chain of disappointments, the ancient rejections you thought you had buried long ago, and the phantom pains of childhood betrayals that have secretly directed the course of your life from the shadows. The human mind, when left unguarded in this valley, becomes an instrument of self-torture, systematically reconstructing every scenario where you were abandoned, every moment where your trust was weaponized against you, and every instance where you opened your heart only to have it trampled by the carelessness of others. You begin to feel an intense, localized ache within your chest, a physical sensation of compression as if your heart is being held in a tight, unyielding fist, preventing you from ever fully expanding your lungs or experiencing a single moment of unadulterated relief. The suffering becomes a totalizing environment, a thick, suffocating fog that distorts your perception of the past, ruins your experience of the present, and completely obliterates any vision of hope for the future. You look ahead at the days and years to come, and you see nothing but an endless, repetitive landscape of gray monotony, a continuation of the same exhausting struggle without the promise of a sunrise or the possibility of transformation. You begin to believe that the pain you are carrying is permanent, that it has become woven into the very genetic code of your identity, and that you are destined to forever be a broken thing, a casualty of a world too harsh for your sensitive spirit. You ask yourself the most dangerous question a soul can ever pose in the dark. What is the point of continuing to fight when the enemy is invisible, when the weapon is my own mind, and when the battle feels already lost? You look around at a world that seems to move on so effortlessly without you, watching people chase their small ambitions, celebrating their transient victories, and laughing in the sunshine, and a profound, icy resentment begins to freeze the edges of your heart. You feel completely forgotten, not just by humanity, but by the very cosmic forces that govern creation, believing that your small, insignificant life has slipped through the cracks of divine memory, leaving you to perish alone in this barren wasteland of despair. But let me step into the freezing center of your isolation right now, beloved child, and let me hold your trembling spirit in this place where you feel most abandoned. I am not standing at the top of the valley looking down at you with a critical eye, waiting for you to clean your wounds and climb out on your own strength before I can welcome you back into my presence. I am here with you in the dust, breathing the same heavy air, sitting beside you in the ash heap of your expectations, fully immersed in the depth of your agony. The human mind views suffering as a sign of failure, a proof of punishment, or a meaningless cruelty inflicted by a careless universe. But in the economics of my kingdom, deep suffering is the sacred ground where the most profound transformations are meticulously prepared. It is within the dark, hidden soil of the earth that a seed must undergo a violent, agonizing death, splitting open its protective shell, losing its original form entirely, and dissolving into the dirt before it can ever grow into a magnificent, fruit-bearing tree. You are currently experiencing the cracking of your shell, the painful but necessary breaking of the outer self that has kept your true spiritual essence locked away in a prison of self-protection. The wounds that are currently bleeding, the areas where you feel most vulnerable and torn apart, are the exact places where my supernatural grace is preparing to enter. A heart that has never been broken can never truly understand the depth of mercy. A spirit that has never experienced the absolute limits of its own poverty can never fully receive the infinite riches of my kingdom. Do not attempt to run from this pain. Do not try to medicate it with the cheap distractions of the world, and do not force yourself to put on a brave face to appease the comfort of others. Let the grief have its perfect work within you. Let the tears wash away the accumulated dust of your worldly illusions, and allow the emptiness to widen your capacity to receive what is to come. I see every single dynamic of your suffering. I know the precise history of every scar that mars your beautiful soul, and I am intimately acquainted with the heavy weight of the unspoken words that die in your throat because they are too painful to utter. You are not being destroyed in this furnace. You are being refined, cleared of the dross, stripped of the heavy, unnecessary armor that you built to survive a world that did not know your true value. The night is indeed long, and the darkness may seem to grow thicker before the first morning light breaks through, but the boundary of your trial has been set by my sovereign hand, and the enemy of your soul is not permitted to cross it. The suffering will not have the final word in your story. It is merely a chapter, a dramatic, agonizing transition that is preparing you to carry a weight of glory, a depth of compassion, and a power of resurrection that will heal not only your own life, but the lives of countless others who are still trapped in the same darkness you are currently navigating. Stand still in the midst of the storm. Anchor your mind upon the simple truth that I am present even when I am silent, and allow my eternal arms to carry the weight you can no longer lift, for the morning is coming, and your restoration is already written in the stars. There is a moment when the weight becomes so heavy that the human voice can no longer articulate a structured sentence. When you are sitting on the cold floor of your room, stripped of all pride, completely broken by the reality of your suffering, you realize that your eloquent words and theological concepts mean absolutely nothing. True prayer does not begin in the grand, beautifully lit spaces of religious performance. It begins in the dust of a broken life. In that exact second when your self-reliance completely dies and you are forced to lift your empty hands toward the great unknown. It is a fragile, trembling movement of the soul, a soft whisper that rises from the debris of your shattered expectations, breaking through the dense wall of your isolation. You do not come to me with a list of achievements or a polished presentation of your virtue. You come as a beggar, breathing in the darkness, allowing your tears to serve as the vocabulary that your tongue is too exhausted to speak. You look up into the vast, silent void of the universe and you unleash a cry that is completely raw, unfiltered, and desperate, asking if there is anyone out there who still remembers your name. It is the prayer of the hollowed-out soul, a sacred surrender that says, I have tried everything. I have fought with all my might. I have exhausted every human resource, and I am still completely bankrupt. This is the turning point of the human journey, the holy threshold where your bankruptcy meets my infinite supply, and where your ultimate weakness becomes the perfect highway for my divine power to stream into your reality. You might feel that your prayer is insignificant, that your trembling voice is too faint to pierce the vast distance between earth and heaven. But I want you to know that the moment your heart breaks into total honesty, the entire architecture of eternity stops to listen. I do not require you to have your thoughts organized. I do not demand that your faith be perfect or unshakable, and I do not turn away from the bitterness and confusion that sometimes colors your desperate pleas. I welcome the raw reality of your anger, the depths of your doubts, and the terrifying honesty of your despair, because it is only when you are completely honest that we can begin the work of real transformation. The religious systems of the world tell you to clean yourself up before you approach the divine, to hide your doubts behind a mask of certainty, and to offer up repetitive formulas that possess no actual life. But I tell you that the most powerful prayer that has ever been uttered in human history is the simple, unstructured cry of a child who says, I am drowning. Please save me. When you lay down your heavy defenses, when you stop pretending that you are okay, and when you allow your vulnerability to be fully seen, you are opening a door that has been locked by pride for many years. You are finally stepping out of the illusion that you are the sovereign ruler of your own destiny. and you are falling backward into the eternal safety of my sovereign care. This prayer of absolute surrender is not an act of cowardice or an admission of defeat. It is the highest form of spiritual bravery, a conscious decision to trust my love more than you trust your own understanding. As you speak into the dark room, as your tears fall onto your hands, you are establishing a new frequency within your spirit, a quiet clearing in the middle of the storm where the static of the world begins to fade away. You are starting to recognize that even in the midst of your profound undoing, there is an invisible presence holding the pieces of your life together, an unshakable foundation that cannot be destroyed by the storms of time. You do not have to beg for my attention, for I was already there before the first tear formed in your eye, waiting patiently for you to reach the end of yourself so that I could finally become your all in all. Your prayer is the key that unlocks the floodgates of my mercy, a tiny spark of intention that allows my light to penetrate the deepest, most carefully guarded dungeons of your pain. Do not be ashamed of your broken vocabulary, and do not think that your heavy silence is a sign of a failing connection. I hear the unspoken prayers of your heartbeat. I understand the deep groans of your weary spirit, and I am already moving heaven and earth to bring you the comfort that your soul is longing for. The response of the divine to the cry of a broken heart does not come as a crashing wave of lightning or a loud declaration that shakes the foundations of the physical earth. It arrives like the very first ray of morning light that gently strikes the frozen surface of a winter landscape, a silent, pervasive warmth that alters everything it touches without making a single sound. My child, I have heard every single frequency of your despair, and I have stepped into the ruins of your life not to judge the pieces, but to breathe the breath of eternal life into your dry bones once again. You have looked at your scars as monuments of your shame, as permanent reminders of the moments where you were not strong enough, smart enough, or pure enough to survive the trials of existence. But I command you today to open your eyes and see your history through the lens of my sovereign grace. For those very cracks you have spent years trying to conceal from the world are the precise pathways where my uncreated light is now flooding your spirit. You are not defined by the number of times you have fallen, nor are you measured by the expectations you failed to meet in the eyes of a fleeting, superficial society. Your true identity was woven into the fabric of eternity long before the material universe was spoken into being, and that identity remains completely untouched, untarnished, and unshakable beneath all the accumulated dust of your worldly experiences. I am reclaiming the territory that the enemy of your soul attempted to destroy, and I am rewriting the narrative of your pain into a spectacular symphony of restoration. Let the heavy armor of your self-protection fall entirely to the ground right now, for you are standing in the sanctuary of a love that requires absolutely no performance, a grace that knows the absolute worst details of your shadow, and still chooses you with an unwavering, furious affection. The heavy winter that has gripped your thoughts for so many months is finally drawing to a close, and the invisible streams of my spirit are beginning to thaw the frozen chambers of your heart. You will no longer walk through the crowded streets of your life with that exhausting, hollow sensation of detachment, for I am anchoring your soul in a profound, unshakable sense of belonging that the world can neither give nor take away from you. The voices of condemnation that have kept you awake in the terrifying silence of the night are being permanently silenced by the majestic frequency of my voice, which speaks over you. Only words of peace, of hope, and of a future filled with an unimaginable beauty. I want you to look at the wreckage of the plans that recently collapsed in your hands, and instead of mourning the loss of a structure that was too small for your destiny, I want you to thank me for the divine demolition that rescued you from a life of quiet desperation. I am building a new architecture within your spirit, a magnificent temple of peace that is founded upon the unshakable rock of my presence, constructed with the gold of refined faith and the sapphire stones of deep, heavenly wisdom. You will find yourself breathing with a lightness you have never experienced before, as if an invisible mountain has been lifted from your chest and cast into the depths of the sea. The tears that spontaneously rose to your eyes during those breathtaking sunsets were not signs of emotional weakness. They were the sacred indicators that your soul was remembering its origin, crying out for the infinite beauty that can only be found in a total union with my heart. I am restoring your vision so that you can see the ordinary details of your daily existence as sacred thin spaces where my grace is constantly hiding, waiting to surprise you with a quiet joy. The relationships that were fractured by the stress of your collapse will either be healed through a supernatural infusion of my love, or they will be gently replaced by destiny connections that are aligned with the high purpose I have written for your life. You do not have to force the future to happen. You do not have to micromanage the steps of your restoration, and you do not have to prove to anyone that you are finally okay. Walk forward into the daylight with the quiet confidence of a child who knows they are completely protected, deeply provided for, and infinitely loved by the sovereign creator of the stars. The pain you have endured has expanded the capacity of your spirit, creating deep, hollow spaces that I am now filling to overflowing with the oil of gladness and the wine of supernatural resilience. You will become a living sanctuary of healing for other broken souls who are still wandering in the same dark valleys you have just left behind. Your story will be a lighthouse that guides the shipwrecked spirits back to the safety of my grace. The darkness did not win, the collapse was not the end, and the deep suffering was merely the labor pains of a magnificent transformation that is now fully manifested in your life. Enter into the rest that has been prepared for you. Lay your head upon my shoulder, and allow the quiet rhythm of my eternal love to steady your heartbeat as we walk together into the beautiful, wide-open spaces of your resurrection life. Every step you take from this moment forward is ordered by my wisdom, guarded by my angels, and illuminated by the unclouded sun of my favor. For you are mine. You have always been mine, and nothing in all creation will ever be able to separate you from the fierce, protective embrace of your heavenly Father. Go in peace, breathe in the fullness of this new morning, and let your heart explode with the quiet, triumphant song of a soul that has been completely, eternally redeemed.